This is Clark Ingram with People Profits LLC. We help people with their employee turnover, their chronically open positions, also known as labor shortage, and skills gap. Today we've got a question, and that is, do you have $1 million problem or do you have a multi-billion-dollar problem? And you'll see where we develop this here in a minute. But you know that your employee turnover is costing you money. You may or may not know exactly how much. I mean, it's not hard to figure out because there's some calculators that are free on the internet. And but you may also know that the cost of reducing your employee turnover is a small percentage of the actual cost that you're incurring year over year. So let's talk about that for a minute. And um, like I said, there are employee turnover calculators. There's an employee turnover calculator on our website at peopleprofits.com. You'd be more than glad to use it. But the issue with those calculators is they're focused on the recruiting, the interviewing, the candidate selection processes, training, and onboarding costs, and that's really all they calculate, which is a small percentage of the actual costs that are out there. And so several years ago, I had a particular situation with a client that became kind of just my standard story when I start talking about this. And they asked me to calculate what their cost of their employee turnover was. And it turned out that the first year that we calculated it, it was right at $1 million. Now, this particular organization only had about 150 to 200 employees. Okay. And then the second year we calculated it, we did 2 years in a row, going back 2 years. And the second year it was $1.2 million. Now, one of the things I want to point out about the cost of employee turnover, it always gets worse. It never gets better. Okay, unless you are putting together a plan and a strategy to do something about it. So he was averaging about $1 million a year in turnover costs. And his first reaction was that he thought the number was puffed. And so I asked him, well, okay, if you think it's puffed, let's say it's puffed by 50%. Instead of $1 million, you're only spending $500,000 a year. And I asked him, does that make you feel better? And he said, well, no, not really. That half a million in his business, half a million or a million was roughly the same. And so he said that he now understood what my point was. And then his next reaction was just absolutely classic. He said, if I had known that it was costing me $500,000 a year and that it was fixable, I would have done something about this a long time ago. And I hear this a lot from the CEOs and the business owners, that they really don't think that employee turnover is fixable. They know it's a huge problem, but they're just not sure that we can actually do something about it. The other thing that I will tell you is that the way I look at the employee turnover calculator is that actually that's just the tip of the iceberg, that those are merely the symptoms. You see those every day because you're incurring them every day. You're spending money on recruiting costs, you're spending money onboarding people, training them up, et cetera, et cetera. And so you see those and they're very clear to you. But I would also say that organizations with high turnovers also have low productivity. They go hand in glove. I've never seen a situation where a company had really high turnover or had a turnover problem and did not have low productivity. It's just they're just part of the same problem. That also is now. This is mainly because that you don't have enough people to do the work that is necessary to get the contracts done. The other thing is that because you've got employee turnover, the people that you're hiring, the temporary workers that you're bringing in at an incredibly high cost, that they also have inherently low productivity because they're marginal people to begin with. And so that's another thing, that another major cost that you're bringing in that could be as much, if not more, than what you're spending in just recruiting people, et cetera. But then we've got an even bigger issue, and this is the one where we take this from being millions of dollars to being an infinite number. And that is that you're losing business growth opportunities. That cost can be infinite depending on what your situation is. One of the companies I worked for a long time, when I went to work for them, their revenues was about $200 million a year. And after we fixed their employee turnover problem, they grew to 1.4 billion in a relatively short period of time. But it was, if we they would not have been able to grow that way if they had not fixed their employee turnover problem. Um, so the question that's being here is, do you have $1 million problem or do you have a multi-billion-dollar problem? I had a CEO one time that was interviewing me to come on as his VP of HR, and he had an employee turnover problem, he had a recruiting problem, and he had a skills gap problem. But his real point was this. He said, Clark, I've got a big enough problem right now with my current operations, and I'm staying where I am in my business because I just don't trust my workforce to be able to take on any additional opportunities. And so he said, what I need is I need somebody like you to come in, stabilize what I have, but then scale it up for all the other opportunities. And he had lots of them. And he said, that's why I would like you to come work for me. And so this is the basic issue that I hear from a lot of people. The issue is not how much you're spending right now just in recruiting and things like that. It's more the growth opportunities and the productivity issues that you're losing. So this is Clark Ingram with People Profits LLC. I help people with employee turnover, their labor shortage, and skills gap. Thank you so much.